Azure DevOps in the Real World with Kyle Nunery.
The Azure DevOps podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffery Palermo.
Hello, I'm your host, Jeffery Palermo. Welcome back. You can always go to www.azuredevops.show to see past episodes and show notes. And if you haven't seen my latest book, .NET DevOps for Azure, you can go to aka.ms/.NET DevOps book. There's also an ebook version. You can go to bit.ly/.NET DevOps ebook, and you can check that out. And if you are running or participating in a user group event or a regional conference, we would love to support that user group event with a couple of free print copies of the book. And so if you just get in touch and request those copies, then we'd be happy to send those out to you. And my guest today is Kyle Nunery. Kyle is an architect that can optimize SQL queries, design a web application, push pixels, design a web API, design a UI, optimize the backend for scalability, and write wicked business logic. His biggest strength is his willingness and ability to work on any problem needed to ship great software. Kyle keeps a pulse on the state of technology with fun side projects, and his primary goal is to work on challenging problems with great people by developing software that maximizes value in its space. Kyle works at ClearMeasure, enabling client software teams to be world-class. Hello, Kyle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to great to have you. You dealt with so many different problem spaces, and I'm eager to kind of get into how that experience has led you to craft some of the tips that you're going to share today. But for people who aren't familiar with you, you've been doing software for a long time. How'd you get into it?
I was going to the University of Florida at the time, and I actually had my first job before graduating back in like 2000. The shop at the time was, using Visual Studio, I think 6 and C++, and they're actually one of the early adopters of .NET. So I've been doing .NET. Oh my gosh.
Since the beginning.
Since the very beginning, since the betas.
It's really useful, though, to have the pre-.NET experience because there's so much software out there.
Yeah, it was fun times. I remember we were building using like command line scripts. Not everything was ready yet.
Right. Okay. So, over that time, I think continuous integration moved from just a conversation or a pipe dream to reality. And now we have fully automated DevOps environments where you can deploy with no downtime right in the middle of the day. Actually, our last episode was talking about that with Eric Fleming. So a lot's changed.
Yeah, it's so much more available now. Sure, you could have kind of like scripted your environment using PowerShell for many years, but the tooling available now is so rich, and there's such a good ecosystem around a lot of these tools. Like Octopus Deploy has this huge library of tasks you can pull in to do common things. Yeah, it's a very exciting time for CICD. I think it's kind of like the commoditization of CICD and DevOps is coming at this point in time, where like it's still it's very challenging to set up and do still, but it's much easier than it was in the past.
Yeah, good point. That's a good term. The commoditization of build tools. Now, speaking of build tools, as I understand, you've done a lot of work just optimizing builds and automation environments. How did you come to focus on that, and what problems were you seeing that led you to dive into that?
Yeah, a lot of our clients were using Azure DevOps. It has a fantastic free hosted build agents that you can use. The issues we were seeing with the hosted agents, there's a couple issues. Is they don't they're not as fast or freely available all the time. Sometimes they can be backed up, so there's a little bit of wait time for the build to kick off. We noticed the builds weren't perhaps as fast as we wanted them to be, and also every time a hosted build agent runs, it's starting from scratch. So for that reason, there was a lot of optimizations that we could have by just creating our own build agents in Azure. Creating our own VM and hosting the pipeline agent on there. So we ended up creating some automation scripts to help us create these pipeline servers or build servers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just talking with some of the previous guests who are actually on the Azure DevOps product team, they're working on making those hosted build agents faster, but even the internal teams at Microsoft use their own private agents, whether it's for custom configuration or just to have them online available, caching some of the build process, just because speed is at such a premium with the continuous integration loop.
Oh, that's a good point too. A lot of our clients have custom libraries that we need installed on the build agents. So it's nice to have the build agent already installed and ready to go.
Yeah. Now, you said that you created a script to automatically create the build agent. Is that the VM?
Yeah. We created an ARM template. You can run the ARM template to spin up the VM, for, I can't remember the exact size of the VM at this moment, like 4SD3 or something like that.
It's always changing.
Yeah. And then, it spins it up with all our settings that we like. And then and then there's a script, PowerShell script that will run that will, uses Chocolate to install all the tools we like to have on our build servers.
What tools do you find the most useful to always have installed?
It's nice to have a quick text editor to open and perhaps help debug things, because sometimes you do have to kind of still go into your build server if you're having an issue and trying to troubleshoot it. So we like Visual Studio Code for that. So yeah, we typically will install Google Chrome, Git, Visual Studio Code, and we also like to have SQL Server Express or SQL Server Developer Edition installed to run our integration tests.
Okay, so you put a database right on the build server.
Yep, we have found, we want really fast build times, and having the database, a SQL Express available to run the integration test right on the server is the fastest option.
So with the database right there on the build server, do you have integration tests that make use of the database run in that first continuous integration build configuration?
Yes. So normally we'll have a build pipeline set up, and in it we'll run the unit test, and then right after the unit test we'll run the integration tests separately, and the integration tests will utilize that local database.
So you were telling me before the show that there's some aspects of build and deployment pipelines that end up taking a long time and need to be tuned. What are some of those common areas?
So typically on the build side of a pipeline, it's the most time is spent in our integration tests, and then on the release side of things, we typically run the acceptance test as part of the release pipeline, and those acceptance tests will also take a long time, and there's a lot of opportunity to do some tuning there. Okay. On the build pipeline side, integration test, the way we're optimizing is typically we'll have a database locally there ready to go. We have some templates where we will, it's really cool how it does it. It spins up an Azure SQL database and it will run the integration tests against that. And that's good for small projects. And maybe if you're just using the hosted pipelines. But long-term, as the project gets bigger and you need more speed during the build, you're going to want a local instance of SQL.
Now, when you say it's slow, what kind of speeds are you seeing?
Speeds typically in the minutes, So what I've noticed a little bit with Azure and ARM templates is sometimes they can kind of hang a little bit while they're doing their work. That time can be from say one time it takes 10 seconds, and the next time it takes 50 seconds. So you can definitely eliminate those kind of delays by going ahead and avoiding having to spin up an Azure SQL instance.
Mm-hmm.
One optimization we have on our Azure templates or Azure is we will reuse the Azure SQL, but just create a new database inside of it. So it doesn't have to actually spin up the Azure SQL every time.
Okay, so when you have the ARM template create the Azure SQL database, it's got to create a SQL server.
Yes.
If there's not one. But if you just create a new database, you can just reuse that same SQL server.
Yes, I think that's what I was trying to say.
That's actually a world of difference, because creating your very first SQL database in a brand new subscription, it's got to create this database the database server behind the scenes. But then subsequent creations of new SQL databases just can reuse that SQL server, and they're a lot faster. I think that's one of the nuances of Azure SQL that a lot of people don't understand, is that there's actual real SQL servers behind the scenes, and your database does not get put on just this big server intermingled with a whole bunch of other people's databases.
Yep, absolutely.
It'd kind of be scary if it was, though. So I'm glad that they don't.
Yeah. Databases are isolated.
Right. Okay. What are the other issues that just typically occur that it'd be helpful for people to know?
Yeah, I guess. So we're running a lot of builds through, and something we just see happen intermittently is NuGet pushes will fail. So you're trying to push your NuGet packages to the Azure DevOps artifacts, and it just fails. So I think that's an interesting aspect of CICD pipelines. The network definitely comes into play,
mm-hmm.
or the service was down. One of the two. But my bet would be on the network. Some kind of network issue happened.
The Azure DevOps podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a software engineering firm and Microsoft Gold partner, empowering development teams to be their best. ClearMeasure equips developers with the DevOps tools, methods, and automation necessary to focus on building their applications, rather than wrestling with builds, deployments, or environments. Click clear-measure.com to see whether a DevOps implementation is for you.
Everything seems to go down or have a blip at some point. Actually, just before we started recording, Google Calendar was having an outage. Which so everything has blips every now and then. But what do you do when it fails? What's the compensating action?
In my case, it's typically just queue up a new build, see if that goes through, and just move on. If it's happening repeatedly, definitely dig into it and try to figure out, is there some way I can improve this step? Maybe build in a retry, or make sure you're doing it the best way possible.
Okay. Now, with these DevOps pipelines, what technology stack do you seem to be doing more work with these days?
For these DevOps pipelines, the two big ones are Azure DevOps for the builds and releases. And then also a lot of time on the release side, we'll use Octopus Deploy. We really like Octopus Deploy on when there's a lot of VMs or a lot of infrastructure involved. It seems to be a really good fit in those cases. Okay.
And are you seeing more .NET Framework or Web or Windows, or how much .NET Core do you see out in the wild these days?
Out in the wild, it varies a lot. So we will have like a WPF application running on .NET Framework. I think it's 4.6. We'll have our new stuff, of course, would be in .NET Core. We have a couple of projects that are totally new code, greenfield. They're in .NET Core, and it varies quite a bit. We have a couple of projects, these kind of massive web form applications. So I think that's .NET 4 something. Running on the full framework. It's one of those applications that's so big, it would be hard to overnight convert it to a new technology stack. So you kind of have to, keep it alive and running as is, and new stuff will be upgraded to the newest technologies.
Okay. So it sounds like .NET Core is still trying to get a foothold, and we have this massive amount of .NET framework systems out there. Probably a while before they all get upgraded to .NET Core.
Definitely, yeah. Many organizations depend on the kind of what we're calling the older .NET technologies at this point. Their core business runs on them, and some of these applications are absolutely huge. I think one of the WPF apps we're looking at is 100 plus screens, and it's a mission critical app for the business. Another kind of large app I've worked on, it was web forms, and we wrote new stuff, and I think MVC 6 is it? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a huge app. 50 to 100 pages. I can think off the top of my head, and it has lots and lots of reports, custom reports already written using existing .NET.
That's an interesting scenario as reports. Is that there's lots of documentation and tutorials about how to do DevOps pipelines for web applications. Is there any special considerations for reporting when you need to get those automated builds and deployments online?
So in the reporting case, it's just basically another web application. So it doesn't add, nothing really changes because it has a lot of reports. It just a bunch of extra. There's a lot of code behind those reports.
Okay, gotcha. You were saying something about was it the you were going to something else? Was it integration tests or?
Oh, in the wild, what we're seeing, a lot of these really large, big applications, the test coverage isn't, it could be non-existent, or they might have a handful of tests. And in that case, we have to kind of come in and start adding test coverage so we can confidently upgrade the application over time, especially in a lot of these applications will have, one of them, for instance, it's a web forms app, but there is one main page that every user of the system really goes to on a daily basis. And on that page and the code behind it, we're adding a ton of test coverage so we can confidently change it over time. Which it's a good challenge to add tests to older code. That wasn't written with tests in mind.
Yes, I can imagine. Now, there's lots of new technologies that are coming out, new frameworks, both for front end of applications and throughout the stack. Which ones are you paying attention to at the moment? Which ones seem to be exciting?
One very exciting one to me is Vue.js. I actually went to a conference for Vue.js in Tampa not too long ago. It was a really good conference. I'm excited about it. I think it's one of the easier ones to pick up, and has a really good ecosystem, and a lot of attention on GitHub. I think it might be one of the most starred projects. Not that stars necessarily mean adoption, but some people are getting eyeballs on it.
Okay, well, what makes Vue different from React or Angular?
Vue, I think it's the easiest of the three to pick up. I would say all three are actually pretty good at this point in time. Like Angular, Vue, and React, I think they're all actually really good. You might get people that are very opinionated. Oh, this one's way better than the other one. But I think none of them will stop your project from succeeding. Vue, I like the learning curve. I like a lot of the plugins are easy to use that I've found in the ecosystem. There's lots of really good tutorials on how to get started.
Okay. And there's with that, it seems like Angular and React have their own ecosystem of tools, especially when putting together the application and then integrating testing and DevOps. With Vue, is it all different stuff again? I've heard of Vuelidate and some other tools there. I
think Vue has a CLI. I believe all three at this point have really good CLIs, and that's the best place to start. You just kind of use the CLI to create a new Vue project. You can pick your testing frameworks. If you want to use a linter, if you want to use TypeScript or JavaScript, if you want to add like Cypress or Nightwatch for acceptance tests. With that, you can have a really well-constructed app very quickly.
Okay. And I think the Kendo libraries have support for Vue now. Have you used those?
Yeah, we used a small amount on one project. Right now, I believe only parts of it are like truly Vue components, meaning they got rid of the jQuery behind the Kendo controls, and it's actually rewritten to be fully a Vue, so you don't have to pull in jQuery. I've always liked the Telerik Kendo controls, but I think the ecosystem, depending on your use cases, is rich enough you may not want to pull them in. But I always like the Telerik Kendo grid, for example.
Okay, awesome. Now you've mentioned Blazor, just kind of leading up, to the podcast. You have some opinions about that, I think.
Yes, Blazor for me is very exciting. The thing that actually excites me the most, I haven't had a lot of time to play with it, but the people behind it, I'm excited because probably my favorite web developer, Steven Sanderson, is behind it, or his name's attached to that project. If they can really pull it off and make it a slick experience where we can kind of get back to the day where we can quickly build UIs again. I feel like with Vue, React, Angular, they are all great technologies, but we've kind of slowed down in our ability to generate UIs. They're complex enough that you might want someone that's specialized in those three technologies, and that's more or less all they do. But I'm very optimistic about Blazor. I'll wait till see. Microsoft does have one, Silverlight was the one technology that was going to be really great and didn't work out. But I know Blazor is fundamentally different using WebAssembly, so I'm still very optimistic about it.
Well, I'm on that bandwagon too, and I don't equate it with Silverlight, because you think of Adobe Flash, there was a category of technologies that Silverlight was just a part of, and it was essentially native browser plugins. That category of technologies was totally invalidated, essentially, by iOS. I mean, really, the iPhone and iPad were so popular, and Apple said, no, we're not going to do that. That it really did. It changed the landscape. But with Blazor, man, I'm looking forward to .NET 3 this fall, where the first version, the first runtime type within the Blazor family will come out. Because I'm with you. I think it's gonna be a game changer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of features we would want in it. Like once you use Vue and some of these others, React, I'm not sure if all three of them have at this point, but hot module reloading. You make a change in the code behind or your JavaScript file or TypeScript file, and automatically refreshes the browser for you. So it needs like that feature.
Yeah, totally.
So if they can get some of these, and a great debugging experience too, they can get those. I'm very excited to see how productive we can be with it.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we talked about a variety of things. Are there any resources that you would point the listeners to? Because the listeners of this show are people shipping software on the Microsoft platform, and they're putting together DevOps pipelines, and invariably they're probably running into some of the things that take a long time that you've mentioned, and struggling through them. Any final tips that you'd leave them with?
Sure. I found two websites really good for Vue. There's I believe it's Vue Mastery and Vue School, both excellent resources for Vue. I would recommend the .NET DevOps for Azure book.
Thanks for the plug.
It's a great starter. Get everyone up and running on Azure DevOps.
So you've read it?
Yes, I did actually read it.
Awesome.
I got my book. I have all these notes I took.
Sweet. Yeah, I hope it helps. We gave away, I think, about 400 copies at the Microsoft Build Conference, and it's kind of working its way through the final proving stages, and then it'll be on Amazon for the mass distribution. But yeah, the preview edition is it's the unedited, that's slightly edited preview edition. It's gotten a surprising amount of traction, so that's good. I'm glad it's helping people.
In one conversation, you mentioned there's actually more chapters coming. Something about microservices and...
Yeah, with .NET 3 is coming in the fall, so my plan is to have a second edition of the book aligned with .NET Core 3, just because there are new things coming out. I mean, there's Blazor coming out with .NET Core 3. It's a major upgrade to the frameworks and the tooling. And then, yes, there's some more common DevOps scenarios that are just really needed, and microservices and distributed applications are one of those, because it does have implications in how a DevOps environment is put together, and there's some different moving parts.
Yeah, I'm very excited about .NET Core and the direction it's going. I feel like it revitalized the whole .NET community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And all the performance stuff they're doing is exciting.
Sweet. Now, you mentioned the script to auto-generate a VM for an Azure Pipeline's build agent. Is that script public by any chance?
It is on Clear Measure Labs on GitHub.
Okay, so the listeners could actually use that to spin up their own private build agent automatically.
Yes. There is some more automation we're going to add to it in the near term, but the ARM template and the script is there.
Okay. And what's that URL?
github.com/clearmeasurelabs/Azure-DevOps-agents. So I'll Slack it to you.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include that in the show notes. So, well, Kyle, this has been a lot of good tips for the listeners. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks. Very fun. Thank you.
And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffery Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.